And go Nuggets. Woohoo! I will now call to order the study session meeting of May 5th, 2025. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person City Council meetings in council chambers at City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the city's YouTube channel online and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy will be absent tonight. Mayor Pro Tem Luke Benhiro-Massa.
Here.
Councilmember Burns. Here. Councilmember Jaramillo.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Roper.
Here.
Councilmember Goff will be absent. Councilmember Nowicki.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 4 discussion items tonight, and the first one is domestic violence presentation and training, and we have Natasha Adler, Director of Survivor Services for Safe House Denver, who will present this item to council. Welcome, Natasha. Please come forward. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for being here and all of the important work that you do. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Likewise, it's good to see you. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay, perfect. Good to see all of you. Thanks for having me. I will hopefully be brief, but I was asked to come and talk a little bit about domestic violence in our community in Adams County, especially with the Family Justice Center that's coming to Adams County. I work at the Family Justice Center, the Rose Andom Center in Denver. And so I wanted to kind of come and talk a little bit about the importance of the Family Justice Center and how we, as the city of North Glen, could be better in our preventative response as well as our responsive actions to domestic violence survivors. A lot of you know what domestic violence is, but I always like to start working with the same language. So the way that we think about domestic violence is a pattern of behaviors over time that involve intimate partners, either current partners or past partners. And that pattern of violence includes behaviors such as coercion, manipulation, intimidation, threatening, anything really that exerts power and control over the other person to ultimately weaponize the dynamics in the relationship for their gain. Abusive behaviors can be active, so obviously active assaults. I've also seen very passive forms of abuse. One example I always bring up whenever I speak is I had a client who used to put raw shrimp, or her abuser used to put raw shrimp in a curtain rod that was hollow, and then it would start to smell, right? And so his big thing was trying to convince her that she was crazy and that she, was losing it all the time. And so when she went to go and ask him, like, hey, do you smell that? He would be like, no, see, you're crazy again. So abuse can take some really creative forms. Abuse also happens in a cyclical manner. It is rarely just a one-off instance, and even if there is, I would argue that there's probably other abusive dynamics at play. Okay, is this the slow thing you told me about? No, okay. So here's some numbers as far as domestic violence. I pulled these from the Colorado crime statistics, but if North Glen and Thornton are anything like Denver, these are way smaller than what we're actually seeing. So North Glen, we had about 150 to 200 cases per year in the past 5 years, primarily assault as the major form of the crime. And most of the victims and perpetrators were between the ages of 20 to 40. Thornton, we saw a higher number of cases, and I wanted to bring Thornton since they're surrounding us. But they also had pretty similar statistics other than seeing about 800 cases per year. Thornton actually has the highest number of domestic violence in the county. And then the Adams County Sheriff's Office had about 200 to 300 per year. Again, these are the same kind of numbers that we see in Denver, but we know from actually pulling reports that we see about 6,000 in Denver, so I would bet these are higher. Just briefly, some myths and misconceptions around domestic violence, so we're all on the same page. A lot of times people think that if somebody has experienced abuse, the best option is to leave. Whenever a survivor leaves an abusive relationship, that's actually one of the most lethal times. Both parties hold some responsibility in the dynamic. This is also not true. We'll hear terms like mutual abuse or a combative relationship, a toxic relationship. That doesn't actually exist in an abusive relationship because somebody is always fighting for the power and control. It's like having two dictators. It just doesn't work. DV only affects marginalized populations. We also know that this is not true. DV does not discriminate against any population. DV is also not caused by substance abuse, anger management, childhood trauma, emotional suppression. All of those things can exacerbate violent behaviors and abusive tactics, but that's not what the cause is. The root cause of domestic violence is that entitlement to exert power and control over your partner for their gain in the relationship. Another one is abusive partners are not a threat if they complete supervision successfully. So supervision meaning pretrial supervision. I don't even know if we have that in North Glen, but for the sake of the argument, as well as probation. Abusers are clever, right? They come up with things like shrimp in a curtain rod. So it isn't hard to go up and do your urinalysis and say what the counselor wants you to think and then go on and reoffend. Again, at least in Denver, about 50% of the cases that we see are reoffenses. And then lastly, abusive partners are violent or angry in all relationships. This really kind of plays into that supervision conversation. Abusers can be very, very charming, and a lot of their anger and abuse is, if not all of it, is targeted towards their victim. It's actually in their best interest to be charming and to be kind and to be agreeable to the outside world. So some lethality factors relating to domestic violence, recent or pending separation. Like I said, this is the most lethal time for a survivor, so why don't they just leave is not always the most helpful question to ask. Strangulation, if there has been a strangulation attempt within an abusive relationship, the lethality chance of that survivor dying in that relationship is about 750%. Same with firearms being present in the home. Stalking is also up there. Prior reported domestic violence, like I said, this is a frequent occurrence. No consent sex, pregnancy, threats to kill, and threats of suicide. As far as pregnancy, when an abusive partner loses power and control and has to share that power with, or has to share that attention with the baby that's coming into the relationship, that can really exacerbate the abuse. And then threats of suicide, we see, I think it's like, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but the majority of our domestic violence cases that end in a homicide also have a suicide as well. So a few things about why don't they just leave? There's financial barriers. If I don't have access to finances because I can't work because I have an injury, or you told me not to work because you didn't like my coworkers flirting with me, it's gonna be really difficult to leave if I don't have any actual tangible resources. If I'm isolated from my supports because my family no longer wants to be around me, because you know what hit the fan at every family barbecue, I'm not going to have anywhere else to go. Access barriers. This is something that we should really consider, especially with our FJC and Adams County being so large. Rural populations and lack of transportation can make it extremely difficult to access supportive resources and safe places. Also limited resources, especially with the changes with the federal administration and different eligibility issues and just availability issues of resources. Sometimes they're just not out there for survivors. Or maybe on paper, they make too much money because their abusive partner is an attorney and they file taxes together. So it looks like that survivor actually has a lot more resources than they have. Housing crisis, there's few shelters. We don't have any in Adams County other than Gateway that are domestic violence specific. Affordable housing continues to be an issue just across our state. Disability or injury, what an amazing form of power and control. If you have an injury and you're totally reliant on me for access to your medical treatment, or if you are covered under my insurance and you're looking to leave, that's going to be a pretty big pull factor to stay in the home. Substance misuse, not only just the stigma around being a survivor, but also being a drug user or somebody who struggles with substances, or your abuser might be the person who gives you those substances, right? So that physical dependency is a factor. immigration status and cultural barriers or expectation, threats of deportment, or just those cultural aspects of certain religions or backgrounds that are big on family values, keep the family together, this is a woman's role in the home, etc. Fear of losing the children or the children being harmed, same with pets, and the just very human piece of love and hope. Whenever survivors get into this relationship, there's a lot of hope there that this can be something healthy and you build a life together. And I guarantee that none of them have anticipated all the other things that come with it. Okay, so the part that is more important to you guys. The reason why family justice centers are so important and why this one coming to Adams County is such a huge deal is because we're able to provide protective factors. So we have all of these risk factors. I talked about all these lethality factors, but we have the opportunity to put in place these protective factors, which help survivors have more of a stable kind of foundation. So they're set up for success if they are victimized by their abusive partner. So strong social support networks and stable positive relationships with others. Being able to be at the Family Justice Center, they have access to their peers. They have support groups. Neighborhood collective efficacy. So residents feel connected to each other when they're involved in the community, which is why I think it was important, and I appreciate being asked to come here tonight because we have that opportunity to be inclusive of our community as well. The coordination of resources and services among community agencies. Family justice centers are incredible in this way. You walk into the room or into the building, and there are dozens of organizations that are within that building where you can walk down the hall and you can hit all of them. If you're a survivor who just came from rural wherever and you have $50 for your one taxi and that is all you're getting, it's going to be pretty important for you to walk into the doors of the FJC, the Family Justice Center, and be able to get a protection order, get connected to counseling, make sure that you get your housing voucher, and also talk about, custody. Communities with access to safe and stable housing. This is something that we will probably always work on. But having safe and stable housing is paramount for a survivor. If you don't have somewhere to land, it makes it pretty tempting to stay at home. Communities with access to medical care and mental health services. Again, if I don't know what's out there or if I don't have access to supportive services, it's going to be a pretty big pull factor to keep me in that abusive relationship, as well as economic and financial help. So if we can include some of these protective factors in our FJC, even if they have already been victimized, that we have a point of intervention so we don't see those same survivors who are coming in with the same needs. Or maybe they have lesser needs, or at the very least, they know where to go. So I kind of talked about this, but the way that I think about protective factors are the antidote for risk and susceptibility to perpetration and victimization. It reduces the areas of vulnerability, and that's what abusers do. They exploit vulnerabilities. They use that power and control. And again, it reduces those push and pull factors within staying in that relationship, that dynamic. It also models for our community that domestic violence is something that we don't accept or tolerate. So survivors have access to those protective factors that self-sustainability is accessible. So just briefly, a Family Justice Center, it's kind of like an umbrella agency. It's a one-stop shop. You're able to come in. The survivor is able to get survivor-specific needs. So not just somebody who is accessing housing because they're looking to move, but somebody who knows the security details around that particular housing complex and the different transportation access points that are nearby and any of the barriers that they might have to moving in with their child, especially if they have a disability or some sort of other special need. So we're able to really provide that person-centered approach. And we're also able to provide some of those foundational stability needs. So again, not just victim services, but housing, finances, legal. Sometimes we see survivors, often we see survivors who have had their credit completely destroyed by their abuser. And so that's not something we always think of as victim services, but it is very much a victim service in that they can't move on without that critical piece, that critical foundational need. The best part is that all these agencies coordinate with each other. We all have confidentiality, but we find wiggle ways around it, and we make sure to work with our survivors so they have to do less work on the front end to make sure all of their needs are met. We're making those connections, and we're making sure that they're getting connected to all the agencies that they need, and that our agencies are communicating. So we're not having the survivor repeat their story and be re-traumatized. We're not having them come to the building 18 different times for the exact same thing. We're removing that extra burden after everything they've already been through. So it reduces the time spent, the risks taken, the re-traumatization, and it's homicide prevention. And this clicker's slow. Okay, so lastly, just as it relates to council, I thought it was important to talk about just understanding the needs of a survivor on not only just an individual level, but a community level, a policy level, a systems level. Again, to also promote awareness and not only around domestic violence, but the services that we can provide in our community, and to find out ways that we as the City of North Glen can participate in building those protective factors within our FJC. And that is my agency's crisis information line, which you totally don't need. I stole this from another work PowerPoint in case you can't tell, but my contact information is on there. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much. Looks like we have a question. Oh, we have a few questions. Hands are going up really fast.
Okay,
So
great.
we got some for you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Really appreciate this presentation. I think I've seen you on a number of monthly Family Justice Center work groups. And I appreciated the tour that a number of us did at the Rosandum Center last October. I think that was really an eye-opener just to try and visualize how you're trying to establish a one-stop shop. My question, and I think it may be more appropriate for Deputy Chief.
Sure.
But you just mentioned that strangulation is a sign, and it could be that it's a harbinger of not really a good outcome. And I'm just curious, Deputy Chief, are our police officers trained in recognizing symptoms or signs of somebody having been strangled?
Good evening, Council. Yes, they are. The officers are trained. In addition to their training that they go through for domestic violence, the Adams County process where they review the domestic violence cases, we've started within, I'd say, about the last 6 months. Adams County's been doing it probably for about maybe the last 2.5 years, the domestic violence process. Right, so there's a review of the cases, and the officers fill out a form that's part of the domestic violence investigation. And if there's strangulation in that piece, that kind of triggers additional resources and additional processes for the DA's office. So it's kind of a full, I don't know if we're the last agency in Adams County, but we're one of the last agencies to start this particular process. I'd say it's been going on about 2.5 years.
Okay, thank you.
I will just add as well that the Alliance for Hope, that is, creating the Family Justice Center, they do a 4-day strangulation training that's really intensive, not only for law enforcement, but for anybody who's in the building. And so they talk about how to, everything from seeing like strangulation marks on melanated skin to defensive wounds. They have a pretty extensive one. And there's stuff online too, if you ever want to take a look at it.
Thank you. Councilmember Walker, and I also do want to mention that Councilmember Walker was the one that asked for this to be brought forward, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Adler, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your service on the CCPP board also for the city. Also, thank you for pointing out some of the factors like access barriers and things that we should focus on with the logistical challenges of Adams County. And I was just curious if there's anything with your extensive work with the Denver FJC, if there's anything specific we should focus on with Adams and ours being brand new, or any broader topics that you wish you saw down at Denver, but that maybe we're able to create up here?
How much time do you have? Gosh, that's a really good question. this is probably a pipe dream because it involves money, right? But one of the biggest barriers that we face in Denver is transportation to the physical building. We have RTD works with us and they give us grants and stuff sometimes, but that doesn't always work for our folks who are wheelchair bound or things like that. Uber also used to have a grant program, they cut that back. So transportation continues to be an issue. Also, some of those agencies that can provide like victims compensation, I know that's through the state, but like community level victims compensation, because we see a lot of survivors who have basic needs like I need to get my, I need to get new tires on my car for me to be able to go to a job interview, to get a job, to then get an apartment. And so some of those barriers are things that we still face in Denver. I will also say too, just subtle plug, I mean, our PD is amazing, but we're working on a strangulation protocol for the entire county of Denver, and we need one in Adams. Respectfully.
That's very good to know, and thank you for expanding on that, and thank you again for being here tonight.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask that exact question, so thank you, Councilmember Walker. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Adler.
Yeah.
You do amazing work on CCPP, and this is amazing as well. So we, for our AdCog dinner last week, which is our Adams County municipal meeting, we meet once a quarter, and we got a presentation from Almost Home,
Oh, great.
and they were discussing how one of the stats they shared with us was just how high our domestic violence rates are in Adams County, like significantly higher than a lot of other counties per capita. And so I really do believe that the Family Justice Center is a need, and this really isn't a question, just more of commentary of
Sure.
how, because Councilmember Walker kind of asked of what live and learn, is there anything we can do better? And I think we definitely understand the transportation part of it, because that's part of our issues we have now, which was, what was the present? It was over 220 miles someone has to travel. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up, and I think maybe working with RTD, CDOT would be a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Very insightful. And again, to echo a little bit of what Councilmember Kondo said, was when we toured the Rose Andom Center, it really brought everything together, and really how we could be that force within the community to help those who are in most need. So thank you for this, and thank you for the work you do.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. This presentation was so important, and we are active supporters of the Family Justice Center. City Manager Geyer is on the steering committee, and I'm on the community engagement committee as well. So we're hopeful with this potential temporary location, at least to get it started. But what Councilmember Walker asked was so important. What can we, while we're setting this up and we have the chance to do it right, and of course money is definitely an issue. So very informative, and I will agree. So as a survivor myself, 33 years ago, there was nothing like this. And I could tell you the nightmare that it was to get out of that, having those top 2 lethality issues that happened with myself and 2 kids as well. And transportation, some abusers will make it so hard for someone to get a driver's license. And that happened to me. I was very young. And so it was a constant struggle just to get a driver's license. So it's not, even having a car is a luxury, but a driver's license is, you never know if that's something they have available. So I did think of something while you were talking about community level victims compensation.
Sure.
I'm on the Vail board. I'm chair of our Vail board.
Yay.
And we are actively looking for other ways to provide, community resources to smaller nonprofits that aid victims. And so hearing you say community level, victims compensation, that is definitely something I encourage you to keep an eye on when our applications open. Yes, and that will be, I believe they open in July for bigger funding grants, but we're also hoping to do smaller grants as well, and that could be helping an individual maybe, for example, with some type of transportation help. Don't know what exactly that looks like, but it is something that we've just started discussing. So I'm very excited that you said that, and would love for you to please stay in touch with the Vail Board and keep an eye open for that. And I will bring it forward to them as well.
Perfect.
Other than that, now I know Councilmember Burns said that we have one of the highest. I thought Adams County had the highest rates of domestic violence in the state.
I have
My understanding?
That is also my understanding. I have also heard it argued that just because we have such a massive county, that the numbers are not necessarily like proportionate because we have more, but we're a bigger county. So I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. I don't know. I just feel like I heard that, which is, it's pretty scary, even the numbers that we have in our small city, and then Thornton, which is about 3 times bigger than us. But, you know, when we're pushing over 1,000 between the two cities, that's
Right.
terrifying. What can we do more prevention-wise? I mean, this Family Justice Center is important. It helps people who are already in it that need to get out, need those resources. But I don't know, like, what kind of outreach can we do better?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I harp on the protective factors. That's actually a slide from the Denver Police Academy where I teach, because it's so important to, when we're responding to calls for service, if they're like somebody who's just unhoused, but there's some sort of weird, violence dynamic, being able to spot those domestic violence red flags can be really helpful. Same with noise complaints or erratic driving. A lot of those are DVs that we miss, right? And our law enforcement is fantastic, but it's not always as obvious and as overt. And so that's something that we also as a community can be more aware of, is those red flags. Anything with an uneven power dynamic, if there's some sort of, if your neighbor isn't allowed to leave the house without their husband to go grocery shopping, that might be worth a question, right? If kids are afraid to go home. So I think a lot of it is education at our schools, our churches, here, right, our law enforcement, really at every level, because I guarantee that there's every single person in the room has been touched by domestic violence or someone they love have. So I think really just bringing forth awareness. I would also really love to see a domestic violence agency specifically outside of Gateway, which Gateway is so wonderful, but they're so far. We need more DV specific services.
Agreed. With the numbers that you showed us and there being no shelter or services close by, that's an issue.
Yeah.
But we are hopefully going to address that with an FJC.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you
Great.
again.
Thank you for having
so much
me.
for being here. Really appreciate the
Sure.
presentation. Very eye-opening.
Sure.
And
Thanks.
again, thank you again for all you do.
Thanks. Likewise.
Okay, next we have Section 36 Sub-Area Plan, and we have Planning Manager Becky Smith, who will present this item to Council. Welcome, Becky.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Tonight, we are here with an update on Section 36, the Subarea Plan. I have Blake Young with Kimley Horn, our consultant team, here to actually do the presentation tonight, so I will turn it over to him.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. Thanks for having me. For the record, my name is Blake Young with Kimley Horn, and we are leading the Section 36 Sub-Area Plan process. So a few objectives for tonight's meeting. We wanted to provide City Council with the project overview, the schedule, and the progress update for the Section 36 Sub-Area Plan, and also review the current land use concepts, and then finally to receive some feedback for the preferred land use. So some quick background, we ran through this quite a while ago, but just as a reminder, the North Glen 20-year comprehensive plan back in 2023 had identified some areas of focus to help guide redevelopment efforts, and the Section 36 sub-area was the first priority. And then a few goals for this Section 36 sub-area plan is to establish a vision and framework for future development. work with stakeholders in the community to develop a refined sub-area plan, and then provide a clear path for developers to make that vision a reality, and then finally, to improve some connectivity and encourage sustainable development and strengthen economic development within the city of North Glen. So the project timeline, we kicked this project off back in August of 2024. We've completed the existing conditions analysis and the community engagement, vision and goals, market study, and land use scenarios are all ongoing and will be wrapping up between May and July. And then also the implementation strategy will be wrapping up shortly after that in August or September. And then finally, the final plan adoption in October. So a quick purview of the Section 36 sub-area. It's just north of Thornton and east of Broomfield on the corner of Weld and Adams County. And then the land ownership division here, it's mostly North Glen, and Anadarko owns a significant portion up there on the northeast. And then some environmental constraints that we found during the existing conditions analysis. First is the regulatory floodway down there by the southeast corner. We'll have to sort of incorporate that and mitigate that during the planning phases. And then also a fracking footprint in the Anadarko site, and then also the force main that flows north to connect to the water treatment facility, the wastewater treatment facility. So the fracking site on the Anadarko portion is a relatively large area of land, and there is a variety of setbacks that are incorporated with the fracking sites. This gets quite confusing as we're going through, what this actually means. So the state of Colorado has a 2,000-foot setback radius. This is for residential uses. For the Section 36 sub-area plan, there is a development agreement in place, so residential development will not be proposed. But that sort of sets the foundation, the essentially parameters for setbacks. And then Weld County also has varying setbacks ranging from 250 to 350 feet. Weld County breaks their land uses for their setbacks into two different categories. The first is residential, and that is a 350-foot setback for occupied structures. And then agricultural, which includes commercial and industrial. And so that setback is anywhere from 200 to 250 feet. And at any point, North Glen can implement sort of higher standards for setbacks. For this site in particular, since we're not proposing any high occupancy structures or residential structures, the 2,000-foot setback seems a little much. A lot of neighboring jurisdictions, they have anywhere from 1,000 to 500. And we've seen around the state that 500-foot setback is sort of the sweet spot for industrial developments. So I would say anywhere between that 200 and 500-foot setback would be appropriate. We also conducted a market analysis for the area. The Denver metropolitan statistical area has seen a relatively static change in vacancy rates. However, the market area has seen a considerable increase in the industrial inventory and development over the past 3 years, and shows a healthy vacancy rate to remain competitive in the market. And this is really good news for us. And based on these trends in the market area and the Denver MSA as a whole, the market area is relatively more conducive to industrial development. A few community engagement efforts that we've conducted so far. The open house number 1 was conducted in September of 2024. And we have recently canceled the open house number 2 to hopefully increase some community engagement efforts. That'll be kicking off in the summer of this year. We'll be hosting sort of joint community pop-up events during the movie nights. We're trying to be a little bit more flexible, meet the community where they're at, and hopefully we get a lot of feedback that way. And then during this process, we also have hosted a variety of stakeholder meetings, trying to pull in as many partners as possible to identify the site constraints. Any type of guidance that we can get from these stakeholders is extremely valuable in terms of planning sort of for everything. So whether it's the North Metro Fire Rescue District or the City of Thornton or Upstate Colorado or United Power, just understanding what these constraints are with these individual stakeholders has helped guide the process. So we developed from this input from the stakeholders and Planning Commission, City Council, city staff, and adjacent jurisdictions, we've developed the vision elements and the vision goals. So the 3 elements, the vision elements, is resiliency, sustainability, and diversity. And then the 4 goals is to create sustainability and renewable energy opportunities, facilitate employment opportunities, promote economic development opportunities, and continue to promote that good neighbor practice to the residents, businesses, and landowners who surround the area plan. So this is sort of the foundation for the conceptual plans. This sort of guides the entire process. And we're hoping that the conceptual plans, the preferred concept at the end of this process, reflects this like a mirror. And at every point in this in the process, if one of these elements or one of these vision goals are not being sort of checked off, it's our job to go back and make sure we mitigate that. So some development types that we pulled into this process is light industrial, flex industrial, and accessory uses and utility. So first, light industrial, that's more of the small scale and industrial facilities like warehousing, data centers, logistics centers. And then flex industrial is a little bit smaller than that. It provides a little bit more flexibility for small businesses and helps sort of navigate market fluctuations. So think of just a little bit smaller space, and we have a collection of tenants. So if one building has 10 tenants and one tenant, they decide to leave their lease, we still have essentially 90% occupancy, and it's a little bit easier to kind of navigate that. Also, their space is easier to fill. If we have a 1 million square foot light industrial warehouse that is meant for one user, and that user leaves, it's very difficult for the city to find, or a developer to find, a replacement for that tenant. And then we also included some accessory uses and utility. This is to really check the mark on sustainability. So the utilities would be energy utilities to provide the reliable energy like rooftop solar, solar carports, and EV charging stations. And this can be sort of incorporated pretty creatively throughout the concept plan. So it doesn't need to essentially have its own space necessarily, but that's something that we'll need to get guidance from you all on. So the first concept utilizes 294 acres of light industrial, and then 57 acres of flex industrial. This flex industrial is a transitional use from 168th North. And so we have essentially smaller footprint buildings. So it doesn't look like, we have these massive, light industrial buildings fronting 168th. So it sort of breaks up the urban form. And then as you get further north into the site, we start to incorporate more light industrial, so more warehousing, more larger format buildings. As you can note, the north to south right-of-way sort of jogs to the east. That's to provide a little bit more depth to the light industrial planning area 5, a little bit more depth to that parcel to make that a little bit more conducive to the developers. And then to sort of hit the mark on sustainability, we would be providing or allowing for the energy utilities like rooftop solar, solar carports, and solar-powered EV charging to be dispersed throughout the concept plan. So with this being new development, it's feasible for developers to incorporate rooftop solar into their building constructions. So since we're not talking about any sort of retrofit of buildings as they are constructing their building type, it's pretty conducive to rooftop solar. I think concept 2 utilizes a little bit less light industrial, so 330, or a little bit more light industrial, 335 acres, and then also identifies a particular space, planning area 4, for a solar field. This would be sort of allocated specifically for that solar use. We have 3 access points along 168th, and then also both concepts have that proposed right-of-way going east, connecting to Colorado Boulevard along the northern boundary. So a few questions and discussion topics that we have for you all today. We wanted to make sure that the vision elements and the vision goals aligned with your expectations. So for reminder, those are identified there up on the screen, and I guess I will hand it over to you, Mayor Pro Tem, to take it away.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for presenting. I'm just a little bit, in regards to your concepts, I see the dashed line box OG. I'm assuming that's the Anadarko well.
So that is the oil and gas existing well. The Anadarko site for the process of this area plan, what we're doing is we're wanting to set the foundation and framework for development long beyond what the Anadarko lease is at right now, past that 20 years. And so for development right now, that fracking site would be, it's obviously active. And then any developer that would come forward that would want to develop around that would have to navigate the fracking site. But beyond their lease, once that fracking site is decommissioned, then we would essentially revert back to the conceptual plan, which would then be light industrial.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, because I was scratching my head there, when I was looking at slide 10, and the cross dash box didn't line up with this diagram, and I was just trying to figure out if it was a clerical mistake or something else going on.
Nope. So the oil and gas well, that dotted box up there, that I believe is actually 2 well sites. I believe they're capped, so not active. But that is something else that would need to be mitigated for future development. And I believe when we go through the final conceptual plan, we'll have diagrams that sort of identify the fracking sites, and then the final conceptual plan in the narrative of the plan will identify or describe the nature of development after that Anadarko site is decommissioned.
Okay. And then while I have the mic, I'll just ask one other question. So if we're talking about light industrial warehouse, 168th Avenue is currently just a 2-way street.
Correct.
I imagine it would be really hard for a semi-truck semi-truck or tractor-trailer rig that make that corner turn, even on the County Road 11, going up to North Metro Fire. So do we also need to anticipate, and as part of the conversations that you're having, say, with Thornton and other stakeholders, part of it is that we're going to have to widen that road?
So the widening of 168th would essentially come with, or through a partnership with the city of Thornton and also the developer itself. So providing that expansion, it would be a joint partnership. And I'm not sure if Thornton has impact fees or not, but they are looking to widen 168th. The widening of 168th is undetermined right now. And I think, something like this sub-area plan, since North Glen is sort of thinking ahead at this point, it provides the city of Thornton a little bit more foresight to anticipate those needs when it comes to traffic. We've also gone back and forth on more data center versus light industrial. The issue with data centers, it pulls a lot of power. And so United Power, they essentially have a capacity threshold, and that changes monthly, weekly, as new projects come up. And so that's something that is a little bit harder to anticipate as a 20-year horizon, but is something that is on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. You kind of touched upon my question a little bit when you talked about data centers, and my immediate flag went up with water.
Yep.
20 years from now, who knows what that's gonna also look like. Yeah, that was just kind of my thought. I think, and just to answer some of your questions on your slide, while I think having the solar field would be cool, might be helpful. I think maybe I'm also just having a hard time wrapping my head around what Thornton, that whole area is going to look like in 20 years, because part of me is oh, maybe the flex industrial would be nice, because you know how you see one restaurant pop up for people to come and for the employees to go and have lunch and that sort of thing, but would we need that? Because I don't know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I think these hit the mark from what can the space actually be used for, and it's pretty much these options. End of list. And yeah, so I think to answer your questions about those, I think these look great.
Okay. And I think that reminds me, in terms of food production, or anything to do with food or beverage, there is a pretty strict regulation between the proximity of these facilities near a wastewater treatment plant. So that sort of limits it even further, just because, obvious reasons. But so we're already starting in somewhat of a design box, if you will. But
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely don't see a Starbucks wanting to go in there.
Or Cold Stone.
anytime soon. Councilmember Nowicki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Mr. Young, for being here and for the presentation. A few questions here. So this is, looking at these plans, this is kind of a 20-year horizon.
Correct.
Okay. So obviously my biggest concern, the wastewater treatment plant there. Number one, want to make sure that our wastewater treatment is protected, and that's functioning well. Number two, I'm always skeptical building, because we don't necessarily get complaints, but Thornton gets complaints. Thankfully we have an agreement where Thornton gets the complaints about the wastewater treatment. But I'm skeptical building anything around that you know, like I've used the analogy, the reason you put the outhouse in the backyard is because it stunk, right?
Yeah.
So if this is kind of a 20-year timeline, and maybe Director Svoboda can speak to this as well, the kind of decommissioning of the ponds, because and full disclosure, I asked Director Svoboda some questions as well in email, and he mentioned the decommissioning of the ponds, and that primarily that's where a lot of the odor comes from, right? So can you kind of walk me through what that would look like, and how much would that kind of mitigate that odor?
So from what I understand, the decommissioning of the ponds would mitigate a vast majority of the odor, and essentially the eastern portion or the northeastern portion of the sub-area plan. I don't want to say this, but it gets hit the hardest by the smell because of the winds. And so that's why we located the flex industrial to the south as well. This is something that we'll be identifying in the plan as well as, or within the constraints portion. So identifying these constraints, this is one of the major constraints in my opinion. And identifying this and laying this out very, very directly and concisely, essentially provides that information to the developers when they come forward to build out here, and it absolutely makes a difference in the land use that we're choosing, whether it's residential or industrial. And now that the development agreement in place essentially prohibits residential, and it sort of already puts us in that land use box. Folks that signed that agreement, they anticipated this area being light industrial. So I think right now it's just, we are trying to be as creative as possible in providing a little bit more guidance to developers when they come in and want to build.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about, in concept 2, the solar. I mean, theoretically, that's really exciting to see that, and to think of kind of ground-mounted solar and something like that. Can you walk me through kind of the feasibility of that?
Yeah, so the city has a few options here. We could do a land lease and lease it to a solar company to come out, and they would essentially pay for their annual lease to operate their solar field on. Another option is for the city to build their own solar field and operate it on its own. And we've seen from our solar team both options. Typically, though, cities are not in the business of running solar fields, so they just say, we'll lease it out and we'll just collect a check. I think the question that we need to be asking is the economic development impact that providing essentially 40 acres solely for renewable energy is, providing the best economic impact. And I think we can be we can take it a little bit further and be creative and sort of identifying a rooftop footprint that equates to 40 acres, because we're talking about, a few hundred acres of light industrial. Most likely for all of these buildings, we're averaging, 100 to 200 to 300,000 square feet for the building footprint itself. And so when you start to multiply that, you can see how that plays a big factor. Another thing is, since this is in Weld County and it is essentially separated from North Glen proper, there is a way to essentially, another two options is the solar field would provide the solar for the wastewater treatment plant, and then that sort of evens out that scale. The other would be to essentially sell it back to United Power, and then that's how you recoup some of that investment. And so I think, you know, looking into a crystal ball, I'm not sure what would be, you know, what would check the most boxes per se. So I think, you know, I want to be able to provide you with as much information, but, you know, it's not my job to, you know, tell you what to do. And I certainly want you to be able to weigh each outcome and how that sort of affects the overall goal of the sub-area plan. And then that's the way that we should go.
Okay. So if you'll allow me to just misinterpret you.
Sure.
So looking at concept one, you're kind of saying maybe we can get some of the kind of comparable solar benefits just out of concept one with just all the space there.
Exactly.
Okay. I think given your conversation and all the questions and things like that, I'm leaning toward concept one. I'm kind of coming around to the flex industrial. Again, my biggest concern is that, you know, people will, it'll stink.
Yeah.
You know, and then the buyer's remorse. You know, what did we do? Why do all our employees have headaches all the time? So, but I am leaning toward concept one with the kind of flex industrial, light industrial mix there. And then incorporating, you know, the solar piece into that. Would that be up to the developers
So
to do, or is that something like we could say, if you want to build here, you have to do this?
So I want to not put my foot in my mouth.
All right.
I'll jump in. Okay, so I think to your question, the city controls a good portion of this land. Do we have the ownership map on here on the slide deck? So to your question, Councilmember, is we can actually create deed restrictions or other types of covenants to the property that would prescribe our expectations for the development of the area of land that we control. So to that end, the area that you see in yellow is controlled by the city of North Glen. Can you jump back forward to the options? So when you take a look at that, that's a good chunk of this area. And so what we're really trying to do with this exercise is to be able to communicate to the development community what the appetite of the city is in terms of future growth and development. And also to your question, a little bit more nuanced, is as city council, if there's something more specific that you want to encourage or promote, there's additional flexibility when we look at doing land deals and negotiations that say, hey, this is our vision, this is what we'd like to see, but if we're negotiating with someone to develop our area of controlled land, we have even a higher level or a deeper level of control over what happens there because we control the land itself.
Okay, thank you. And since while you're up here, when are the ponds said to be kind of decommissioned? What are you looking at?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's a years-long effort, and we have incremental steps to that. I do know that we do have a CIP schedule. I just don't know the exact timeframes for that. Jason, do you have any?
Good evening. It is in the 5-year CIP. Picking out a specific date is a little bit of a challenge, but I would say by 2030.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think to your earlier comments, I think for the rest of the council is that there will be a disclosure about proximity to our wastewater treatment facility. And so I think that's the other part of this whole sub-area plan is that that's a challenge with development of this site. And that's the reason why you're kind of seeing what's being presented here tonight. And I think the other part for this, which is the other side of this exercise, is that we want to take this out to the community in those future stakeholder engagement exercises to sort of get the feedback from the community here in North Glen to sort of gauge what their reactions are to these ideas that you guys provide feedback tonight on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you both of you, all of you, for your work on this.
Yep.
Thank you for those questions. I do have a question. It might be for Director Svoboda, but what is, I mean, I know you don't want to put your foot in your mouth and we have to kind of give you the direction, the vision, but what is the feasibility, especially with it being in Weld County, of the city, you know, overseeing a solar industrial dedicated solar area versus like selling it back to United Power? Like, is that a feasible thing in terms of staff capacity, city capacity? Capacity wise, I would like to know which one is more realistic, more feasible, sustainable.
That's a big question.
Sorry.
I can say that early on, one of the ideas is to, once we decommission the ponds, is to put a solar array that would effectively zero out the energy consumption for the wastewater treatment plant, so we wouldn't have a bill anymore. Whether the return on investment pencils out, we'd have to look at it at that point in time when the ponds are decommissioned, because there's the land prep, there's the capital costs, and then there's the time that it takes to recover that based off of the annualized savings. I think right now the plant is about $5,450,000 a year in energy consumption costs. So not all of that, I'm not sure that all of it's electric. I think some of it may be natural gas as well. But we would have to do an actual economic analysis for that. In terms of concept 2, where we talk about the solar, we've had folks who've made requests about doing a solar garden where they would basically lease the land and come in and provide something like that. I also would suggest that part of the idea here of us reflecting that was from the feedback we received from council at the first session that we had with you on this conversation. So really, as Blake was saying earlier, we can incorporate that in concept 1 as well. It's not mutually exclusive. To get more to your question, it would really have to be on a case-by-case when we look at the analysis. For an on-site solar decommission, there wouldn't be much staff resource for that. If we did it in the decommissioned pond area, it would just basically be a reverse meter thing, just like it is here on the city hall. It would be minimal commitment, I think, on that side.
And that's kind of a combination of concept 1 and concept 2.
Yeah.
Where we'd still have the solar capacity to run, the plants off of energy and whatnot, and also have potential for a solar garden
Correct.
run by somebody else.
Yeah, and maybe the best way to put this is in the upper left corner where the ponds are now. That's likely where we would put the wastewater treatment solar array. The solar that we have shown here that goes the vertical north and south or top and down, that narrow strip, was really more for like someone else to come in and lease land. But the opportunities, because that's also part of the land that we control, is we could do something there that would also serve the wastewater treatment plant and not necessarily use the decommissioned ponds too. So there's flexibility. We're not tying our hands in any way to a specific program.
Okay, thank you. There's still hands up. Sorry, Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for the presentation and all the information. I do like the flex industrial zoning for concept 1, and of course all the solar stuff we've been talking about having the buildings, having that solar component. I think that's something we'd be, looking forward to in the future. 20 years from now, I'm sure, it's going to be common practice, I'm sure. So I know that RTD is going to have their end line going through to Colorado 7, and that's 162nd and Colorado Boulevard. That's going to be their last stop, if I'm
Correct.
correct.
So,
Okay.
so right now, RTD owns the right-of-way that comes diagonally through the site. There are no plans to extend that end of line through our site. And we are right outside of the TOD boundary, essentially walk shed boundary of that end of line station as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I like that. We can have a flex industrial, maybe put something that could accommodate commuters or whoever's working there. Just whatever needs there is. Let's see. We talked about this a little bit with the the wastewater treatment plant, And, there's going to be more people there. So, would have to take like heightened security, I feel. If there's going to be so many people working there every single day, that's just something that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and I think there's ways to mitigate that. Mostly it's security fencing, and with a lot of the light industrial developers that we're working with today, they have the same concerns with their buildings of providing that security fencing, and so I think it would be mutually beneficial to have light industrial, because then you're essentially having that security fencing built at the developer's expense.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kondo, you had your hand up, but you put it down. Change your mind? Still have a burning question?
No, Councilmember Jaramillo was asking the question about RTD, so thank you for thinking ahead on that.
Great. I have a couple of questions. I know you canceled the most recent community engagement. Was that just anticipating not a whole lot of engagement? How has the stakeholder engagement gone so far? Like, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the stakeholders that were listed up there in terms of, yeah, we think this is a great idea, this is what we see? I know there's probably a more detailed report coming out soon, so I don't want to steal your thunder on that, but just an idea of where the feelings are on that.
So to answer your first question, we canceled the second open house because we were anticipating a low turnout, and we wanted to make sure that that we're sort of meeting people where they're at to make it a little bit more accessible to provide feedback. What we found is a lot of folks, they may not even know that this area is part of North Glen. And so I'm sure as city council members, you've all heard the not in my backyard. So when this is not in their backyard, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. But we wanted to make sure that we get some feedback, because at the end of the day, this will be impacting the city as a whole in terms of just economic viability and return on investment when we have this land. So we want to make sure that we're getting as much feedback as possible. And then for the stakeholder meetings, we essentially have a summary report for each meeting that we have or have had. And then that will be going into the appendix of the final plan. And that will sort of outline all of the constraints that we chatted about. A lot of these stakeholders, especially Thornton, United Power, they gave a lot of really good insights with the constraints of the site, and especially United Power chatting through data centers, because the planning team, it was just obvious to us that data centers make a lot of sense. There's not a lot of employees that are in the buildings, and it provides a lot of economic impact for the city in terms of tax revenue and tax base. However, data centers do pull a lot of energy, and understanding their capacities have been sort of eye-opening, and that's where we sort of transitioned from data centers and providing a specific use for data center. Our job at the end of the day is to provide as much flexibility with this plan. So we do not, we restrict the development in the future, but not too much, because we want to attract someone to come in and build on this area plan. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like guiding a big ship. We may not be able to make a U-turn, but we can certainly guide it in the direction that we want.
Okay, great. Now, is the idea for any or portion of these buildings with all this solar and battery storage, substations, and solar carports to be fully electric like this building? Or is that too high a capacity, especially with United Power and the energy draw being a potential concern?
I think it may depend on the use itself. With light industrial, a lot of these are manufacturing, so running extremely heavy equipment, and I'm not sure what kind of power that would entail. It really depends on the tenant itself, and what their processes are. But the solar would certainly start to counteract a lot of their power usage and help to mitigate that.
Of course. And looks like we have another question, but I think the question just left my head. In the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about light industrial versus flex industrial, and that's definitely the conversation that we had when we went through this the first time in terms of better uses, because obviously residential and coffee houses are not going to make it there. But I thought you mentioned that in terms of like ROI or potential empty spaces or future proofing, recession proofing even, something like flex industrial is easier, but both options have more light industrial. Is that just like the capacity of flex industrial? Like, I know that might be beyond my pay grade, but
So this is some feedback that we got from Upstate Colorado, one of our other stakeholders, in identifying tenant space for light industrial. There's a term that they have. It's called, having a dinosaur. It's essentially a large format building that is, say, someone came in, they built a 800,000 square foot light industrial building. It was solely for their use, and they essentially fabricated the building to fit their needs. Once that lease runs out, if that tenant were to leave, it is extremely difficult for that developer to find a replacement. The flex industrial, if you think about it in terms of residential, it's like having a mansion versus a mansion with 20 bedrooms or a multifamily building with 20 units. If it's going to be really hard to find a tenant for that one mansion to fill those 20 rooms. But if one of your tenants leave a multifamily building, then it starts to sort of recession-proof that layout, and it's easier to find a tenant to come in and replace.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll let some folks ask other questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I'm kind of like piggybacking off of your last question. So, speaking of recession-proof and things that are happening, would light industrial cover, like, everyone's talking about bringing manufacturing back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just thinking 20 years from now feels like a very long time, and things could be very different from now. So something like, would a manufacturing plant make sense here as well? Is that something to think about? Is it just not conducive? Because I am just thinking, Amazon's down.
Mm-hmm.
So what is going to be the need for warehouse spaces or whatever in 20 years? I just am thinking, and maybe I'm thinking too much into this. Maybe I should just let it go. But just thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think from our market analysis, what we've seen is sort of a uptick in manufacturing, light industrial uses, distribution in particular. A lot of these uses, especially in the past 3 to 5 years, we've seen sort of a growth pattern in the Denver MSA as a whole. And since, historically with Denver, we had Rhino as sort of the hub for that. And as that starts to transition into different uses, into a different character, what we're seeing is other municipalities sort of, picking up on that and really driving home the opportunity to bring a more diverse tax base to their doorstep. And what we've seen, especially on the I-25 corridor, around 470 is a massive uptick in these uses. And so that's where, we see it on the back end because we do a lot of private development. But until we sort of cross-check that with the market analysis, you know, once we did that, it was pretty evident that, you know, we feel confident that light industrial would be a strong move.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Burns, are you leaning more towards concept 1 or 2? I mean, they're very close, but one has a little bit more flex industrial, so.
I mean, I think 1, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just trying to put my finger on this, and I don't know if you're familiar with buildings on Huron just south of the Maxar complex.
Yep.
So is that, and like, I'm talking about 116th and Huron and
Yep.
going up towards 120. Is that considered light industrial, flex industrial? Can you?
So I believe that's a mix of both, but it's an industrial zone. So it would cover everything.
Okay, gotcha. I think I'm okay with concept 1. I find concept 2 attractive from the standpoint, and I think Director Svoboda just mentioned this, right? We're spending almost $500,000 a year on electric bill just to run our sewage plant. And so having some sort of power generating capability to help offset that bill, I think, is attractive to me. That's why I kind of like option or concept 2. But you're saying concept 1 could also accommodate that, especially if the pond is decommissioned, right?
Correct. And to be clear, I think the process from here on out is trying to find that the Goldilocks scenario, the Goldilocks concept. So we certainly don't want to, you know, it's not one or the other. I think after this, we can hit the drawing table and come up with a solution that is more of a mix. Or if you really like concept 1, then we can you know, refine it a little bit and then go with that. But certainly don't want you all to feel like it's one or the other.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because I'm definitely leaning towards 1, but also, as Director Svoboda mentioned, we can have an element of 2 to have that solar covered. So I think that's kind of a Goldilocks.
Yeah.
That was a perfect way to put it. Scenario that we're hoping for, and that hopefully will come back to us. Councilmember Roper, a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I was just going to also say that I'm more in favor of concept 1, especially if we can add in that element of solar on that.
Okay.
Great. Councilmember Walker, do you want to weigh in?
I just echo everything Councilmember Roper said.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? I think we asked you so many questions.
Of course.
Thank you so much. What I'm hearing is what we're hoping will come back to us is something that looks like concept 1 with that light industrial and flex industrial, a little bit more on the flex industrial side versus concept 2, but with the potential like rooftop solar option and solar garden option so that we get our solar covered, and but the city doesn't necessarily have to manage its own solar site.
Absolutely.
But without seeing that number, it's kind of hard to know, you know, what that's going to look like. I know I'd definitely still be interested in learning what that option would look like too if United Power were to bring it back. So is that something that will come back to us in the future? Like, oh, by the way, this is what it could look like if United Power were to buy that portion of land?
So I think and just to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, you know, if we were to identify a portion for solar, like what would that mean for United Power? Or what would that mean for, you know, the impacts?
Both.
Both, okay.
Both. How does that sound to everybody? Just to at least have that information, but I know none of us want to place more unnecessary, you know, burden on the city, but
You know,
we can
I
have our
think
cake and eat it too.
I think a great way to describe this is, especially with the decommissioned ponds, that space is going to be arguably undevelopable. And so with the constrictions of like the site location, I mean, the ownership will be under the city. At that point, it's sort of a win-win in my eyes for the city. Now, when we go forward, so say we do allocate that land for solar, at that point, the city would have to conduct a feasibility analysis. The pricings for these panels change every 6 months or more frequently. And so understanding what essentially the financial cost to undertake that project, I think that would just need to be analyzed once we cross that bridge. But I certainly don't think we would be putting ourselves in a bad position because the land itself is undesirable.
I think we asked enough questions. Do you have the direction that you need to move forward?
I think I got it. And I just want to say thank you for all of the questions. This has been extremely helpful for us. We want to make sure that we're reflecting your all's vision and make sure that we're sort of touching base as we go so we don't get too far in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thanks for all of the great feedback and kind of confirm what we heard this evening, which was definitely option one with the flex and light industrial, but also continuing to explore that opportunity for solar, especially city solar in the decommissioned pond area and that feasibility. So
Sounds good. Everybody good? All right. Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Great. Next up, we have our Crisis Response Unit update, and we have our crew program manager, Jessica Hulse, who will present this item and who also set up the Rosandom tour. So thank you for that. Kind of segues into the first discussion item.
Yeah, there was a lot of crossover with the first one. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Thanks for having me here. I am here to give our crisis response update that I do throughout the year. So, as a background, the purpose of this is to provide an update to Council on the Crisis Response Unit. The crew was implemented by Council in October of 2021. The crew takes referrals from our North Glen Police Department, our neighborhood services, our municipal court, and our citizens, or residents themselves. And always, our monthly reports can be found online. So the numbers I'm sharing tonight can reflect our stats from January 1st, 2025 through April 15th, 2025. And these referrals that are in the chart reflect our new crew clients, so clients that we have never worked with before, not reoccurring clients that we have worked with before. So under the graph, you will see the total number of unique individuals served is 438. So we were referred a total of 215 new clients, but we did work with 438 total clients for the month. In this chart, you also see how many people were referred through the different referral sources, as well as what number of those people were experiencing homelessness at the time that they were referred to us. The other thing to note is our municipal court does refer clients to us, but oftentimes we are already engaged with them through a different referral source. So it looks like they are not referring people to us, but as you can see in the services provided column, we are providing services to people who were referred through our courts. So the Crisis Response Unit really has 3 different programs that we do. We do crisis intervention, we do homeless intervention, and we do targeted violence prevention. So I will walk through those 3 different programs to show the differences in their outcomes. So crisis intervention, really connects people to therapy, assists people with transportation, it connects to stabilizing resources, it connects to financial assistance, hospitalizations, and provides case conferencing with schools or other partner organizations. Listening to Natasha earlier, some of our crisis intervention does cross into kind of that prevention of domestic violence. We do have people that come and talk to us regarding their current hardship situations, and we do have that emergency fund that we can then work with people through that often provides support in ways that Natasha was saying people need support earlier today. Our homeless intervention, these are often done through our encampment outreaches, our Monday, Wednesday, Friday rounds through the civic campus, providing walk-in resource hours on Fridays from 9 till noon, which we are still doing at the Justice Center, participating in Adams County Built for Zero campaign, which is still focusing on veteran homelessness in the metro area, and participating in the severe weather activation program, which is run through Almost Home and funded through Adams County. And then our targeted violence prevention. This is our newest one. You've heard me talk about this through 2024. And currently, CREW has worked with North Glen Police Department to implement a targeted violence prevention program. Since we have started focusing on that, we have started hosting the North Metro Threat Assessment Group, and that meeting started occurring in January of 2025, the fourth Thursday of every month. Since then, it has grown to incorporate a lot of partners, police departments, including North Glen, Thornton, Westminster, Commerce City, and Brighton, as well as Adams County Sheriff's Office, then partnering organizations such as the FBI's Threat Assessment Team and Colorado Information Analysis Center. We have some mental health people on board with Community Reach Center, as well as West Pines Behavioral Health, the new hospital off of Huron. And then we have 3 different school districts joining us in those meetings, Adams 12 5-star schools, 27J, and Mapleton school districts as well. The CREW attended the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals Conference, as well as attended a training by Nicoletti Flater Associates with Aurora, Lakewood Police Department, Thornton Police Department, and Las Vegas Police Department. So I think this is the piece everyone likes the most, which is our case studies. And I give a little case study from each of the different programs that we are working with. So our crisis intervention team, we had a new resident move to North Glen, and he has active hallucinations. He has a long history in a different city that he had moved from. We were able to coordinate care with his daughter and his best friend, and we were able to get him directly into a behavioral health hospital when he was experiencing severe paranoia here in North Glen. This all happened without incident, which was great because we were able to establish rapport with his live-in support as well as his friend support that came over to the house during that time. It was almost a diversion because we had created a safety plan, but 2 hours later, the friend called us and said that the safety plan was not working. This also created a more trauma-based approach because we were able to have so much background. We were able to give him the room to work with his in-home supports before having to go back out there. There was no combativeness, there was no hostility, and we were able just to work with him directly to get him into the place that he felt most comfortable as well. He was able to exit and go back home. He did have another mental health episode, but at that point in time, we also were connected to his care team. So he went to the hospital on his own. We were able to contact the hospital, let them know that he's already established care at a behavioral health hospital, and they were able to transfer him there. So this is just to demonstrate the connectedness of all the different systems that we are working with to try and get people not just to the emergency room when there is a crisis happening in the moment, but to extended care that will ultimately help them as they move through their difficult times. Our homeless intervention story, this is a 32-year-old male who had been experiencing homelessness for over 7 years. He had moved we finally got him moved into housing, which is great. His story includes courts, jail, 2 other apartments, and then finally treatment. Since treatment, using the opioid settlement grant, in getting him into that Rally House, which is the partner that we use with our opioid settlement grant, he has been able to maintain his sobriety. A text that he sent describing his first few nights in his new apartment. It is very nice. I kept forgetting. I didn't have to make sure I was out of the way or something like that. I didn't realize how ingrained that feeling was to me of not feeling welcomed or I belonged somewhere. It is feeling a lot more like home every day. And that was really great to hear from this guy. I've known him now for about 4.5 years. And he is, like I said, he's entered into housing 2 other times, but without treatment. And without that treatment, he was vulnerable to people using his apartments and manipulating him to the point where he was back out in a tent and other people had occupied his apartments, which is not great for the apartment. It's not great. It's not a use of his voucher, and it's not great for him either. So we were able to work with those different apartment units, make sure that those other people were out, maintain his housing voucher, and then get him into a place that is his own. He feels comfortable there, and he's able to currently work with his support systems that he has in place from his sobriety. So that's been really nice to see. For case studies with our targeted violence prevention program, it's a little harder to go into the actualities of what's going on, just because you're working with a lot of vulnerable people, whether the person themselves that's causing the behavior of concern or the people that they are causing the behavioral concern to. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what it takes to break down the silos of information to have coordinated care on timely people that we are working with. And so we have coordinated on cases with Adams County Sheriff's Department, with the Department of Homeland Security, with Thornton Police Department, with Adams 12 5-star schools, youth detention services, and internally throughout North Glen with our different departments. These cases are complex and they typically need a timely response using different modalities. Having the targeted violence prevention team has helped coordinate information, as well as gives us a systematic process for handling situations where there's typically a lot of information to sort through. So like Natasha was talking about with the DV LAP, which our police are trained on, we also use something called a TV LAP, which is Targeted Violence Lethal Assessment Protocol. It is an assessment tool that was developed through CU, and it's going through testing right now. The DV LAP has been in use for years, but this one is new. So we do use that as our initial screening tool to see if the person of concern meets criteria for a threat assessment. And then we go directly into coordinating care with whoever we are seeing they are also in contact with. This has proven to be very useful. I'm looking at my mic a lot because I have a little fuzzy friend jumping all around over here. I don't want to jump on my face. But the coordination between the systems has been really timely. We've also seen the usefulness of this because other departments, like South Metro, does not have a threat assessment group that they work with coordination of care. And so they are often reaching out to our North Metro threat assessment groups to see who that they can talk to. Because oftentimes when a person of concern is in the community still, and they're not doing anything illegal yet, and they're not doing anything that warrants an M1 or a mental health hold, they still are working in a certain city, living in a certain city, going to school in a certain city. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen between those different departments. And just knowing who to reach out to in those different departments is super useful when starting to put a case together. So co-response across Adams County. North Glen, we still have our internal co-response team. Adams County also has an internal co-response team. Brighton has their co-response team through. Can I just start? Can I brush this without making? It's just getting so close. Let's go, buddy. Let's go. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It's,
Jump out at you.
There you go.
thank you.
No more
I need
spider.
a bug help. Thank you, DC.
Exciting times.
Brighton has their co-response team contracted through Reaching Hope. Federal Heights has their co-response team contracted through Reaching Hope, and that is a little bit difficult because they only have a co-responder 1 day a week, which we also get calls from Federal Heights. Federal Heights also calls Thornton because it is such a need in a city that does not have a at least a 5-day-a-week program. Commerce City, they are building theirs. Their commander that's going to be overseeing it just reached out to me to set up a meeting because they're going to be looking to model after our co-response team here. And I think that their funding is mainly coming from that same funding that we have funding through with the ARPA dollars through Adams County. Our co-response team is still the only one in the county that also handles our homeless navigation. The other cities do have homeless navigators, but they're not connected to co-response, and there is often difficulties with sharing information that way. And there is a heavy overlap, as you can see through the numbers that we provide too. Potential financial impact of our team is when we can usually use evidence-based numbers through housing. So these are the number of people that the crew helped get housed out of homelessness from January 1st through April 15th. So I know Councilmember Kondo asked me to come up with a updated number because last year I was using numbers from 2017. So I found this stat put out through Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and they estimate that taxpayers spend an average of $45,000, $993 per person experiencing chronic homelessness due to medical and mental health services, substance abuse treatment, jail, and temporary shelter costs. So Colorado Coalition is also using their number of $18,800 to house someone, and they have that number through the Fort Lyons program down in Los Animas. That $18,800 amount is also equivalent roughly to what a housing voucher is going to cover. A housing voucher is dependent on the number of people in the household, but an average housing voucher is going to be around $1,500 per month is what it's going to pay. So that means that each housed person has a potential tax savings of $27,193. So in January, we housed 2, February, we housed 1, in March, we housed 8, and that includes a family of 5, which is pretty amazing work by co-responders. I did not meet this family, but they came in on a Friday, and I was in a meeting, and this family of 5 walked in, and our team was able to immediately figure out that they are veterans, get them down to the veterans program in, I think it's in Lakewood, and they were able to be put up in a hotel until they were, and this was a veteran that was fully eligible for benefits, and they were able to move into their housing, I think 2 weeks later. So that was pretty amazing work because this family had no idea where to start. They were new to Colorado, and then 2 people were housed before April 15th in April. I don't know if we housed any more people through April. The grants that we are working with, so the opioid settlement grant is $202,000. Oh, my numbers are off. $202,500. There's a typo. And this takes us through April 15th, where I said that 2 people are currently in the treatment. So as a reminder, that grant covers 5 individuals going into 30-day treatment, as well as 5 individuals being paid for up to 2 months in sober living. Up till April 15th, we were able to get 2 people in treatment. Since then, we've also gotten 2 more people into treatment for that month-long stay, and still only the 1 person in sober living home so far. And then we were also awarded a regional transportation grant for a value of up to $825 in bus passes. That is lower than we received last year just because there is more applicants, not because our need declined. We were awarded the Adams County Public Health Department grant for a total of $418,630. That will cover 2 different co-responder staff members. We have not yet hired anyone. Hiring has become a challenge, but we do have 5 interviews tomorrow, and they all look like great candidates. So I'm excited to get in there tomorrow and meet these people. It did cover a secure transport vehicle. We have purchased the vehicle. We are now working on getting it outfitted with the cage that's inside of it, as well as the light bar that will be on top of it. It also covers some money in training, which we have started to spend down, and onboarding safety equipment, and we have started to spend that down as well. Oh, another one, which was pretty neat. One of our co-responders, she applied for a grant to attend a conference on forensic psychology. She was awarded that, and she was able to go to a conference that was hosted in Puerto Rico. So that was exciting. Our 2025 budget, we are on budget. We are within budget. It currently pays for 1 program manager, myself, 4 of our co-responders, and then we have an operating budget of $64,861 for some of that's going to be emergency services for clients that we are working with, as well as our own training and travel costs and communication, such as our cell phones. And I think that's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that presentation, and we do have some questions.
Great.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Ms. Hulse, for being here.
Yep.
I've got one question, but a lot of kudos.
Great.
I always appreciate you being here. First of all, I really appreciate you including the tax savings. I think it's important to show that not only do these programs work to help folks experiencing homelessness, mental health and substance use issues, but it also demonstrates to the community that it can help save money. So I do think that's important. Also, I want to give you kudos on the North Metro Threat Assessment Group. That sounds huge. And really, again, going back to the whole an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes.
You know, that
I
sounds
agree.
like it really could help, the community, and it's even having an impact now kind of metro-wide and maybe even statewide in some.
Yep.
So, and I know that was kind of your brainchild, your kind of love child, and so I appreciate you really diving into that and making that a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and you actually helped facilitate this, us taking a tour of the West Pines.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you speak a little bit maybe about how do you anticipate the new West Pines might help support your work?
Sure. So West Pines is the new behavioral health hospital of Huron. It will be the largest one in the state. It will have 144 beds. I talk to them almost every week, and they are up to 48 beds over there. They are still consistently full, but we have been able to use them for some direct admits. So that means for our team, so when I place someone on, or our team places someone on a mental health hold, all that does is get them to a place that's going to further evaluate them. Typically, that is going to be an emergency department. An emergency department will take that person. They have then 72 hours to evaluate that person, including a psychiatric evaluation. When they go through that psychiatric evaluation, that's what determines if they go on to a behavioral health hospital. Historically, those hospitals have been Centennial Peaks, the Mental Center, the Medical Center of Aurora, Denver Health has a behavioral health wing, and then West Pines could have been used when it was down in Wheat Ridge. And then they are reevaluated down there. So you can do a back-to-back M1 here in the state of Colorado. So their psychiatrist would have either made the determining factor, yes, this person needs to go on for another 72-hour hold, or yes, we are going to go and do what's called a short-term certification and place them involuntarily into a behavioral health hospital, or they will have worked with the client to get them to voluntarily go into a mental health hospital. When we can do a direct admit to a behavioral health hospital, it means that we bypass that emergency room. So when you're not using services that are not historically made for behavioral health, and you get to go directly to a hospital that's designed to treat behavioral health conditions. And so they are still on that 72-hour hold, but they are surrounded by a behavioral health staff that's what they focus on. So when you can do those direct admits, then you see a lot more progress for the person. They can be connected to outpatient therapy. They can be, West Pines will have partial hospitalization. That's not up and going yet. Any of their outpatient services has not been opened yet while they still work on getting their staff for their inpatient beds going.
Okay.
Yep.
Lastly, just a suggestion. I would be curious to see, you included kind of the total number of unique individuals. I would be curious to see that kind of over time.
Sure.
That's kind of plotted over time.
Yeah, and you can, and I can definitely bring that to my next update, but you can always see that also at the northglenn.org/crew and see our reports, because I do provide that. And then you see the graph of each month as well.
Cool. Lastly, you and your team are still the best in the county.
Ah, thank you. I'll let them know.
Second that statement. All right. Let's see, there's so many hands up here. I'm just going to keep on this side and move to the other side. So Councilmember Walker.
Miss Jessica, no questions, and I just want to say great presentation. Thank you for all
thanks.
the work you do. And as long as I'm sitting up here, you guys will always have my support.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you for all
I
you
appreciate that.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you so much for this presentation. I want to echo Councilmember Nowicki on just like showing just like the sheer savings, because your Q1, you've basically, for how much money we put into this program, we've already made back, essentially, from like a community standpoint.
From a community, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that's really important to note, just how important these programs are and how actually fiscally responsible they are to actually, be good neighbors and kind to each other. And I think it's great. I also just want to point out that you were with the Nicoletti Flatter Associates with like everyone around us and then Vegas. And I'm like, oh, okay. One of these departments is not like the others.
I can tell you a little bit about that. It's because Vegas does not yet have a threat assessment group. They also do not have co-responders. And with the recent attack in Vegas, they reached out to the city of Aurora because Aurora is well known across the nation in their threat assessment groups. And that's because Courtney and Tim, who also trained North Glenn's team, they set up the team in Aurora, and now they are nationally. So Aurora, Courtney now works for Secret Service, and Tim now works for Colorado Information Analysis Center. And so they left this team with a lot of knowledge. So whenever an attack like that happens across the nation, Aurora gets consulted on. And so when Aurora was putting together this program for our teams, they invited Vegas to come in. Since then, Vegas, as a police department, brought out Nicoletti Flater and Associates all the way to Vegas and said, please teach the rest of us on that. And then they've also said we might want your co-responders to come out to Lakewood's team and our team to fly out and teach their city about co-response as well. Awesome. So they are trying to get on board with the mental health. Right now they have just such a response on their hotel strips and their hotels that they haven't been able to focus on this. It usually gets pushed around from department to department, but they're taking it more seriously.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for everything you do. Appreciate you.
So glad you asked that question. I was wondering, Vegas?
I know.
All of us were probably thinking, why? That's such great work. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. 2 questions. First of all, great work that you're doing. Thank you for doing the slide on the benefit side of all of this. So obviously, this all works in an ecosystem with having partners and providers. And in view of all the funding and grants and things like that being frozen, I wonder if you have any leading indicators of some of our partners having challenges at this point in time?
Yes. So Behavioral Health Administration funds a lot of different co-response teams across the state of Colorado. I think you would remember that from about 3 years ago when we were looking at applying with BHA as well. At that point in time, BHA was only funding co-response through community mental health partners. So Community Reach Center, Well Power in Denver, Summit Stone up in Fort Collins. This July is the end of that model. Now BHA is only funding co-response teams directly through municipalities or police departments. They are no longer funding them through community mental health partners. So those community mental health partners, such as Jefferson County Mental Health, they had to pull out of their co-response models that they were providing to different municipalities in Jefferson County. The larger teams that I work with, so Denver's team, I'm pretty close with their director, as well as Lakewood's. They both did not get the funding through BHA that they thought, so they've been receiving historically. So they are both in a position now where they are having to figure out where their funding is going to come from. So Lakewood's team had a hybrid model where they had hired 2 people internally, and then they had the partnership with Jefferson County Mental Health. So Jefferson County Mental Health is no longer being funded, so then they applied to keep those clinicians on and then provide the external, still the hybrid model. They did not get the funding for that. So now they are trying to figure out how to run a city the size of Lakewood with 2 internal co-responders. So their city council is going through some adjustments at the moment or some considerations. In Adams County, I don't think any of our co-response teams are still funded through BHA. And I think that is a large kudos to you, this council, because we were the first internal model in Adams County. Since then, everyone else has gone to an internal except for Brighton and Federal Heights. I don't know what their future looks like. I think they have a great relationship with Reaching Hope, so that's great. But I think it also shows the sustainability that we have here, that we are not being faced with those challenges, and those are challenges that those 2 larger programs did not think that they would be having to face right now, and they are. So it's a hardship for sure.
Thank you. And then my second question, along the lines of the Metro Threat Task Force, it sounds like there's kind of a information nexus center, or, I'm using the military jargon, the Joint Operations Center, where you got multiple services working together. Now that you have multiple cities with organic crisis response units, is it time, or is there any discussion or movement afoot to creating a fusion center so that you can actually coordinate, share the information and coordinate activities across the county?
Right. So that's a great question. We are using Colorado Information Analysis Center, Kayak, is our fusion center around here, and they are part of our threat assessment group. So they would be our fusion data sharing. So we are forming one of our sergeants sits on our threat assessment group, so a patrol sergeant, because then they are also able to see when a case that might be around here or they have more information about than I do, if something needs to rise to our patrol division, so everyone, then we can share that internally. So we do have a briefing. What's that word? When we have a kayak briefing, what's it called? Yeah.
Giving us a notice or something?
Yeah. We formed one. It's a report. It's a standardized report. And so then we are also sharing that with our partners through that threat assessment group. And then we are also just looking at the legalities of what we can share in something like that, posting that goes between agencies. So I think we've narrowed that down, and we have the format of it. And then we also just know what can be on top. And then we also notice that it doesn't usually provide any probable cause for an arrest. It's just an information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. It's a tricky term.
What was the term?
An information report. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for this, and thank you for all that you do. This is such a great report. and really shows how much you guys are helping our community. So thank you for that. I do have a question that may seem a little foolish.
Yeah.
When we talk about threat assessment, is it similar to the threat assessment that schools use, where you look at the precipitating factors, like a 360 review? Of
It is not yes, it is similar.
Okay.
So I've been a part of a couple of threat assessments through schools. What happens when we're partnering with a school, they do their own threat assessment because they use a different model. We use the Turk model, which is Threat Evaluation Reporting Certification model, and then the schools are trained on a different model. The schools' questionnaires, I think there's like 97 questions that you go through in your report. And then each school has 3 different staff that are dedicated to threat assessment for that school. So they do that, but we are brought in after that fact or before that fact. So depending on who has the information first, we have sometimes gone in before, provided that information that initiated the threat assessment at the school level, and then we've also been involved in after the fact when they have done that and they need some community supports because the school is really responsible, and what I'm finding out right now, for everything that's happening at the school, but also the bus stops. And so we have a threat assessment case that we are helping manage. The kiddo lives over, not in our city, but the bus stop is a point of concern because the school is legally responsible for that bus stop, but the community supports are what's actually logistically helping out with that bus stop, including family supports. And when that family is not willing to provide that at the bus stop, then it opens up a pretty big point of liability.
Thank you. That's great information. I also meant, like, when you're dealing with other individuals, is it a similar process for them as kind of the 360?
Yes, a similar process. We don't have the 97 questions because we're not looking at parents, and when you're not dealing with someone who's a child, you're looking at more like their places of employment and stuff like that. But yes, it is a similar process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much for this information. It is everything we ever hoped it would be and more. We knew this was going to be a model for other cities, municipalities, and it is. So that's incredible, and kudos to you and the team, your team, for doing this work. We're so lucky. I'll just say that. I know we're so lucky. One thing I will mention, I think all the great statements and questions have been asked, but since it's regarding homelessness, and you talked about that, how important that coordinated effort is. I would just like our residents to know, those that have reached out about the batting open space that belongs to Thornton.
Yes.
Even though it affects Northland residents. So I just wanted to make sure that any residents viewing this or that may view this understand that that is Thornton property. However, our crew has been working as much as we can in conjunction with Thornton's crew, which is called Homeless Outreach.
Yeah, so Thornton has a co-response group program that works out of the police department. That is not their homeless navigators. Their homeless navigators works out of Community Connections. And with that encampment, I believe the departments that are working on that currently are homeless outreach team as well as park staff as they do the assessment, and then police, maybe co-responders would respond, but that might be a duplication of services with their HOT team. So our team, the Crisis Response Unit, has told the HOT team that if they have a list of individuals, if there's someone that already on our case management team, then we are happy to continue to case manage and coordinate with Thornton's response and enforcement and help reiterate that to our clients. But right now, I'm still unsure of who the clients are that are over there.
Okay. Thank you for that as well, because I know that's difficult, right, when it's not our city and trying to navigate that, but it affects our city. So I wanted residents to know that, and I know there's more meetings, and I will say that Thornton City Council members have said they're also willing to have a conversation, which is good information for everybody to have, that the parties involved are willing to have a conversation about it, and city managers are working together as well.
Yes.
But thank you overall. I don't see any other questions. We appreciate everything you do.
Thank you. Thanks for your continued support. It means a lot.
Thank you. Okay, team, we have our last agenda item, and that is the draft 2026 budget calendar. Deputy City Manager Loveland, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. So this item is really just to present the draft budget calendar for this upcoming 2026 year. I'm just going to flip to the calendar portion and kind of highlight a couple of important time periods specifically for council. Starting in August 4th specifically, and then August 18th. We've tentatively scheduled those dates as when departments and capital program will be presented to council. Other key dates are September 8th, September 22nd, and then October 13th. Tentatively have adoption of the 2026 budget scheduled for October 13th. And then we'll back that up with a public hearing on September 22nd. And then the initial proposed budget after we've kind of had our conversations with council about the proposed that will come forward in August on September 8th. Really, this is just to make sure that you get this on your social calendars and make sure that you're at those council meetings, because those are the next 5 important council meetings regarding the 2026 budget. With that, I was not doing that. All right, we've got a birthday behind us. All right. Anyway, I've lost track of what I was thinking about. So really, I guess, really just said that this was informational for council. One piece that I will put out there for you is if there's a desire to move the adoption date. We do have kind of a backup date of October 27th if we have some conversations that push back, but typically we tried to get the budget adopted before the election, that first week in November. So technically we have until December 31st to adopt the budget, but I know that that's not something that we typically like to do. So happy to hear any feedback on the proposed calendar if you have any.
I don't see any hands or questions. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a calendar, it's a timeline. Looks good to me.
Tremendous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, are there any other items for the council tonight? Go Nuggets. All right. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.